Welcome to this animal justice special training, Put Animals on the Ballot in the Federal Election with Camille, Labchuk, and Franz Hartmann. So I'm Kimberly Carroll. I am your host today. I'm also a campaign strategist with Animal Justice and director of the Animal Justice Academy. I just really want to welcome all of you compassionate souls here today with us live. I know it's not easy to clear an hour in the middle of your day, so I just really need you to know how much we appreciate your presence here. And I want to welcome those of you who are watching the replay. We're really happy to have you here with us as well. So, folks, we Canadians find ourselves in the middle of a very chaotic whirlwind federal election campaign right now. And we're here today to get you trained up and to help ensure that animal protection is part of the conversation in both this election and in this next parliament. So we're going to be taking you through a lot of ideas on how you can be a voice for the animals in the political spectrum over the next few weeks. And I want to give you a little bit of background on these wonderful folks that are leading us through this today. So first of all, I want to introduce Franz Hartmann, who has over 25 years experience as an environmental activist, building alliances and in government relations. He is the coordinator of the Alliance for a Livable Ontario. He was the executive director of Toronto Environmental Alliance, love that group, for 11 years and helped create public support for many environmental policies at Toronto City Hall. Before that, he was the environmental advisor to City Councillor Jack Layton. And then he oversaw Jack's civil society engagement activities on Parliament Hill. Franz has taught numerous environmental policy courses at the University of Toronto and has a PhD in political science at York University. Welcome, Franz.
Thank you very much. Nice to see all those faces.
It is wonderful. I love political engagement is a sweet thing, isn't it, Franz? All right, we have Camille Labchuk. Probably a lot of you don't need introduction, but we will anyway. Camille is one of Canada's leading animal rights lawyers and executive director of our Animal Justice, which is Canada's only animal law advocacy organization. Camille's worked to protect animals for over 15 years. As a lawyer, Camille seeks out cases that enhance the legal interests of animals, expose hidden animal suffering, and result in meaningful policy changes. And as an animal advocate, Camille's work includes documenting the commercial seal kill on Canada's East Coast, exposing cruelty in farming, protecting the free speech rights of animal advocates like you, and campaigns against ag-gag laws, trophy hunting, circuses, zoos, aquariums, shark finning, puppy mills, and more. Camille is a graduate of the University of Toronto Faculty of Law and Mount Allison University, and she's obviously a frequent lecturer and media commentator on animal law issues. Camille, so good to have you here, my friend.
Oh, so great to be here with both of you. Thank you.
Yay, and we are getting more and more folks showing up today, and I love that we have all these bright shining faces here. Okay, so folks, I really want to start with setting the tone for this election. So Camille, I'm going to start with you. How unusual is this election? How high stakes is it? And what does this mean for animal issues in this election? Give us a little rundown.
Yeah, I mean, probably everybody on this call today can't recall any circumstance quite like this in the past one. For the last few years, I think people have mostly thought, well, we kind of know what's going to happen in the next federal election. The Conservatives have been leading in the polls for a long time. The Liberals have been down. And it seemed as though Canada was set to swing towards a Conservative government.
Yeah.
And of course, just in the last few months, intervening events have changed things drastically. So we're now seeing Justin Trudeau is gone. We have a new prime minister. And the question that people seem to be putting now in the ballot box is not about Pierre Poilievre's framing of whether Canada is broken, but the question is, what is Canada going to do to stick up to the bully to our south, Donald Trump? And right now we're seeing actually a massive shift in the polls. The Conservatives are trailing behind, the Liberals are ahead. The NDP and the Greens both appear to be down, as do the Bloc. So this is shaping up to be quite different from past years. Some of you will recall that the last election in 2021 was kind of an election about nothing. Justin Trudeau called it because he wanted to seek a majority. He had a minority parliament, and he thought this was maybe a good time after COVID to go back to the polls and hope that voters would give him a majority. That didn't happen, but as a consequence of there not really being a major ballot box question in the last election, there was quite a lot of space for animal issues to be debated and discussed. And we saw for the very first time, really all of the parties put forward reasonable policies on animals, even the conservatives. They were actually first out of the gate with an animal protection plank in their platform. The Liberals had one as well. The Greens and the NDP have generally been supportive of those issues. And so animal issues got some airtime in the last election. This time, I'm not so sure that's going to happen. I think that a lot of very important issues, including the environment, including a lot of social issues, are being pushed aside in favor of Donald Trump and the economy taking up all of the space. And with yesterday's tariff announcement, I think that's going to continue. So we're in a bit of an uncharted territory, I would say.
Franz, what anything to add to that? Like you're seeing the same thing. I mean, you're in the environmental movement first and foremost. Everything else is kind of getting suffocated, right? And all the other issues.
Yeah, indeed. And sorry, in my experience, when I was with Jack in Ottawa many years ago now, 2003 to 2006, which seems like an eternity ago, but also like yesterday, every party focused on trying to get the ballot box question. And for those who are watching who don't quite understand that phrase, it's essentially, what do you want voters to ask when they're about to vote? What's the one question that's going to help them determine it? And it's clear, as Camille said, that the ballot box question this time around is who's going to be best to deal with the bully Donald Trump. For those of us who are engaged in other issues, in my case, environmental issues, that's kind of a bit, on one hand, it's like, oh, that's unfortunate. On the other hand, it creates a lot of other opportunities. And I think the most important one is that this is a great opportunity to create relationships with your candidate, excuse me, and people who are involved in politics. There are a lot of people now engaged in politics who may not have been engaged in the election because of various reasons, and they're now engaged. And this is a good opportunity to join and to build relationships. And in the case of all the people on this call, talk about animal justice issues. This is it's a great meeting moment for everyone.
You're right. There's a lot of bandwidth right now for this election. I mean, well, maybe there isn't, but there is a lot of attention going to it. More engaged people than ever before, like for a long time that we've seen. So this is on everybody's minds, and some of the actions that we're going to sort of suggest in this session are not only about moving the politicians, but moving other voters. So I think what I'd like to do is, first of all, talk about this idea of, first of all, Camille, I know that you're so passionate about the idea of getting politically engaged as one of the most powerful things that an animal advocate can do. So can we back it up a little bit, and can you talk a little bit about that? Can you inspire us to understand why this is such an important path that we need to get skilled at?
Absolutely. I think that being politically engaged is an area that the animal protection movement has not historically been very adept at, and it's got massive potential for being able to drive policies. And I'll break that down a little bit. So and just to back it up a little bit further, my sort of first real grown-up girl job was working in politics as well. I worked for a Green Party leader, Elizabeth May, right after she became the leader and on her leadership campaign as well, back in 2006. So Franz and I probably had a little bit of overlap around that time in Ottawa. And it gave me, I think, a special insight into the democratic process, special insight into what motivates people who actually hold office in Ottawa, and how you can best use and leverage your skills and your relationships to make sure that they pay attention to your issues. So yeah, I think that we, as animal movements, have ceded a lot of territory in terms of lobbying and in terms of electoral work to our opponents, which would be the big industries like farming, like the fur industry, like the sealing industry, industries that have a lot of money and have a lot of ability to hire fancy lobbyists in Ottawa. We might not have that, but what we do have is people power. We have tons of committed, amazing people, including all of you here on this call and many more across the country that I know will watch this later, who can get engaged in elections. So first of all, what's the point of getting engaged in elections? The point is so that we can later better usher in policies and laws that we want to see after the election. we have to keep in mind that the people that we elect to send to Ottawa are there to represent us in some important way. And one of the best means to develop relationships with those people so that they can hear your will as one of their constituents is by getting active during an election campaign. During an election campaign, candidates, well, members of parliament, I should say, become candidates. They're no longer your MP. They're someone who's asking for your vote, asking for your support so they can be sent back to do the work that they want to do. And as a consequence of them needing support from the public, they become much more accessible to voters and to you to get in there and develop relationships with them. And we've seen firsthand so many examples now since this movement has become more politically engaged of people meeting candidates during campaigns, asking the right questions at the doorstep, asking questions at the debate, volunteering by knocking on doors for the right campaigns. And they're able to develop a relationship with candidates. Sometimes those candidates win, and that relationship continues afterward. And then you've got a candidate who has become an MP who is much more interested and excited about representing their constituent, you, because they met you and they engaged with you during the election campaign. And so I know we're going to break down in a lot more detail some of the ways that you can start to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Camille. And Franz, you're a big believer in this idea of relationship building with constituents. Tell us a little bit about your experience with that.
Yeah, well, having been on both sides, having worked for a politician and being lobbied and having people coming and talking about issues that matter to them, to us, and then also being on the other side, talking to politicians about issues that matter, in my case, of course, environmental issues. It's given me a really interesting insight into all of this. And I think that the key thing is that to remember is that, first of all, candidates and politicians, elected officials, they're just the kind of the talking head of a team, of a larger team. There's a lot of people around them, and these people have a big influence on that elected official and the candidate. And that's because they've developed a strong relationship. You know, we all know this. We build relationships of trust, and when challenging tasks come our way, we rely on those people. So to add to Camille's point, I think it's also important during an election not just to focus on the candidate, but the key people around the candidates. In a typical election campaign, you have an election manager, you have an outreach coordinator. There's a number of people, and if you go to a campaign office, you'll quickly find out who they are. These are people you want to get to know as well, and you want to, because they are the ones that are going to actually have the most influence on the candidate and the MP, and if they become elected. And you want to get to know them, you want to talk to them, you want to find out what their world is like. And this is a great opportunity to, in the conversations, to say, yeah, and here's what's important to me, animal justice issues. And it's less about trying to convince them, and it's more about creating the relationship with them. And because of the election is the most important time in any candidates or any political officials' work life, right? This is their jobs on the line, right? And if you're there helping them, they're going to acknowledge that and appreciate that. So all of this is to say, get to know the candidate for sure, but also get to know the people around the candidate. And that also includes other volunteers who may not be paid, but are there because they care about the candidate for various reasons.
Great point, Franz. You know, in our work, our legislative work with animal justice, I'm sure Camille will back me up on this, but it's the assistants, it's the staffers who we do a majority of our work with, right? So if you've got a good staffer who is really dedicated to these issues, or really trusts you, or you have a great relationship with them, it goes a really long way. Yeah.
Indeed.
So folks, I just want to mention we will sort of pepper in some questions from you, and we'll have some time for questions at the end. So if you have a question, just to differentiate it from the rest of the chat, can you just do a star Q, that sort of thing, just so we can see it, and we will take some questions as we go. Okay, so let's cover in a little bit more detail some of the ways that we can use this election to build for animals. Camille, let's start with this whole idea of canvassing, door knocking to build influence with local candidates and their teams. You've had some, this is something I know that you're really like jazzed about right now.
Absolutely. Well, thanks. And I love that we're starting here because in my view, this is probably the best way to build this relationship is volunteer in a campaign. So, yeah, I mentioned earlier, I previously had worked for the Green Party. I'm not a partisan at this point in my life. I'm really happy to support people from any party whatsoever that's committed to doing good things for animals. And I'm especially excited about volunteering for and helping out individual candidates in ridings where they've told me that they're committed to these issues and perhaps ones who've got a track record. So just to give you a little bit of a flavor of, my personal approach to this, in the last provincial election, we just had one. For those of us in Ontario, you will know this because you voted about a month ago. I donated to candidates from a few different parties, and I knocked on doors for my local member of provincial parliament who was running again. Because he had been really, really good on an animal protection issue. He'd put forward a bill to try to prevent birds from colliding into office buildings. Really, really important work. And I knew that he had our back on animal protection issues. So the way that you can do this is by signing up with a campaign. They all have campaign websites, they all have volunteer forums, and all you really have to do is go there, put your name there, your email address, your phone number, and believe me, they will call you, they will follow up, and they will make sure that you come out to volunteer with them if you'd like to do that. Campaigns can be really persistent, at least the good ones can be really persistent in trying to get volunteers mobilized. So typically, and just to demystify what this actually looks like for you, because it sounds maybe scarier than it is before you get into the thick of it, it's actually really fun and really easy. So they'll call you, they'll say, hey, we need some volunteers for this shift coming up from 1 to 4 p.m. this Saturday. Are you available? You sign up, you show up. Often you arrive first to the campaign office, and sometimes they have cookies or tea or snacks for volunteers. Oftentimes the candidate is around, so you can meet them and maybe say a few quick words to them. Sometimes they'll give a little rally the troops talk. And then the campaign will give you everything you need to go out, often with a partner, and just knock on a few doors for the afternoon. And usually what you're doing when you're knocking on doors is trying to identify people who also want to support this candidate. And you'll make a little list and check them off if they say they want to support them. And that way the campaigns can call those people on election day and help drive their voters to the polls. So the benefits of doing this are A, that you get to potentially meet the candidate. B, your name gets put into a database somewhere in the future that people can look at, and they'll know that you actually tried to help out on that campaign, and that will go a long way towards some credibility. C, you'll get a great chance, as Franz mentioned, to meet some of the important people around that candidate as well. That could be their campaign manager, their director of canvassing, other volunteers. I can tell you every single time I've knocked on doors for a candidate, I've met just really wonderful other people. They're probably going to be people like you. They're civically engaged. They're passionate about making the country a better place and usually the world a better place too. So I would say knocking on doors is absolutely one of the best things you can possibly do.
Amazing.
And I just want to add
please,
in
Franz.
another really useful outcome of knocking on doors is you find out what matters to people and how they're framing ideas and their concerns. And I know so often in my work, and I suspect it's the same with the animal justice crowd, we just want to tell people, hey, listen, look at what we're doing wrong, and here's what we should be doing to correct that. And I think one thing that I can say for the environmental movement is that we need to listen a lot more, because when we start listening properly, we actually begin to understand how to frame our issues so that they reflect and they have an impact on people. And so canvassing is a great opportunity to listen to people and find out what's going on in their minds and in your community and across the country.
So you two, can you, for those that are like, oh, but I don't know all the political answers and I don't necessarily know about all the party platform, can you address that a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, you go ahead, Camille.
Well, I was just going to say it's really easy. They're not expecting you to go out there and represent the party and convince voters on the doorstep or speak eloquently about the issues of the day. All they're expecting is for you to knock on doors and say, hey, are you going to vote for this candidate? Yes, no, maybe. Great. Thanks. Have a good one. It's very, very easy. All the training will be provided.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are many other tasks that need to be done during a campaign for candidates. So if you're the sort of person who just doesn't really want to, be public facing, as it were, and you don't want to knock on doors, there are many other things you can do to volunteer. For example, there's always, almost always flyer drops where, people just drop flyers off in mailboxes. There's stuff to do back in the campaign office. So
There's
if you
signs, putting up signs.
absolutely, yeah.
Mhm.
So there are many, many ways of volunteering. But if you are into connecting with people, I can tell you there is nothing better than knocking on doors and saying, "Hi, do you support candidate X?" Yes, I do. Great. Will you put a sign up? Are you willing to put a sign up? And they say yes or no. And if they go, no, I don't support candidate X because they don't do blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. Maybe you have a conversation with them. Maybe you see that they have a cat, just off inside the house, or a dog or whatever. That opens up an opportunity to chat about stuff. Now, you don't want to spend too much time doing that if you're with somebody else, because the job of canvassing is identifying who your supporters are. But there's lots of opportunities there to connect with people and to learn about what people's concerns are.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's a
Yeah.
great point. I've definitely seen animals inside people's houses before, and I've said, "Oh, are you considering voting for whatever candidate?" I'm here helping them out today because I know they really care about animals, and sometimes
Yeah.
that's really persuasive. Um, and maybe if I could just have one more thing that I should have used as a bit of a frame early on. I think it's really important when you are volunteering on a campaign to tell them why you're there as well, so that they know. They don't think you're just there because you generally support the policies of a party, but say, look, I'm here because I know you've taken this good position on animal protection, or maybe you're supporting someone who's already been an MP. You say, I'm here because you voted this way on this bill, and that meant a lot to me. It's really, really critical that they know that the animal people are going to show up for them. If they show up for us, there's a relationship of reciprocity there. We're going to help them do more of that important work in the future by helping them get reelected.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. And, if you are somebody also that, supports environmental issues, which I think every animal advocate should, and also electoral reform or anything that sort of affects animal issues, you can also bring that up, to be able to push some of those things forward a little bit. So a question around canvassing, because there are, Cheryl Simpson, for example, is saying, I live in an agricultural area. The conservatives always win, looking for suggestions on how to talk to the usual guy who wins after the campaign. I want to just, first of all, address, because this is coming up for a few people. When you know that your candidate that is not going to support animal issues is always guaranteed to win, what would you recommend? Is this just canvassing, just not one thing, like something that you put aside that you wouldn't engage in? I mean, I know it would be hard for somebody that doesn't agree with the ethics of an MP to go and canvass with them, but what would you say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is it's a really individual question. I can see that there would be a really strong case, and depending on the circumstances, for potentially knocking on doors for someone that you probably might not even vote for in the end, or that you disagree with their policies. If you think that there's some potential that that relationship can be used in the future in a valuable way to help animals. So, but I appreciate, as you said, Kimberly, that's not something that's easy or possible for everyone, and then sometimes might not be worth it either. If that person belongs to a party that is not going to take a good position on an issue, or that that person personally is very much on the other side of animal protection or another issue, that might just not be where you want to put your effort during an election. And there's other ways we're going to talk about that could be more valuable to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind with getting back to relationship building and elections is, and I'll use the analogy because it's appropriate. My daughter recently started fostering a cat. End of January, Potter showed up in her life.
Oh,
And
Potter.
as we learned, and I have allergies to animals, so unfortunately I haven't had the pleasure of having animals at home. But we, at the outset, it's like, okay, Susanna, so how are things? Is Potter friendly or whatever? And it's like, no, and any of you who have cats know this, it takes a while to build the relationship. It doesn't happen overnight. It was good 2 weeks in before Potter actually started having any sort of interactions. I mention this because this is politics as well. You can't expect instant impact. And in the case of the person who asked the question about living in a riding where there's a conservative candidate, think about this in the long term, as you would if you were, if a cat just showed up. Things aren't going to change overnight, but if you get engaged, and maybe it's with the candidate, maybe it's with another candidate who has a position which is better. Maybe it's just focusing on relationships with core volunteers, opinion leaders in the community. This is an opportunity to build those long-term relationships, and it may take 2 years, 4 years, 5 years before it gets to the point where this actually has a big payoff. But as we know, when dealing with cats, for example, you don't expect to be cuddling with them within the first week or two. It takes time. The same takes place with politics. You have to be willing to you have to be patient and build relationships, and eventually it will blossom into something wonderful.
Yeah, I love that. By the way, somebody's saying vote for Potter. And Sandra is asking a similar question to Cheryl, and so that's a really interesting idea that being able to, like, if you just can't stomach sort of working with a politician that you just don't align with, then finding one that does, that isn't going to win, but is a chance to educate people about what is possible with that candidate, that party, and also to be able to drop a little bit of animal protection in the conversation if possible. So yeah.
Add one thing to that, Kimberly.
Yeah,
Just
please.
the idea that there are some parties who've historically tended to have stronger animal protection provisions than others, but that there's no real reason for this. If you look at voter bases for all parties, polls show that supporters of every single party overwhelmingly support the goals that we are all focused on as well. The reason we don't have good animal protection laws, it's not because the public doesn't want them, but to some extent the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And we're talking about some parties hearing an overwhelming amount of contact from people who do want to see strong policies, and others maybe just not hearing that. And so I think Franz is really right that there needs to be long-term relationship building and outreach to those sectors that have historically not been as supportive, because it's not that their base doesn't want strong animal laws and policies. It's just that they haven't heard enough from voters that it matters to them, and they haven't worried enough that they're going to lose voters if they don't address those concerns.
Yeah, that's a great point. Shane had asked, how can we work to make animal rights a nonpartisan issue? That's one of the ways, to reach out to and become, create a relationship with those that you might not, meet eye to eye on all issues, but maybe they have shown in the past that they have a soft spot for animals. Maybe you've heard that their daughter is vegan, things like that. And those are the ways, to get in and be able to influence people of all political stripes. So, okay, so I want to move on to another aspect of being able to influence for animals, and that is donating strategically. So Franz, can you talk a little bit about this? And, does this make a difference? And how much do we have to give to make a difference? Tell us a little bit about this as a strategy.
Yeah, I mean, every donation matters. Obviously, because when parties and when candidates are in the middle of an election, there's a lot of money that needs to be spent on various things. But of course, the more zeros you have behind the first number, the more attention you're going to get paid. And I think it's no big surprise. Somebody who donates $10 is going to probably get a thank you email or whatever. Somebody who donates, up to the maximum amount, which I'm not sure what that number is, let's say it's $5,000, I don't actually know, is probably going to get a phone call from the candidate, right? So money does influence things. However, so does showing up, for multiple shifts during the campaign period. So does showing up at, canvassing, dropping flyers, coming to events, etc. These also have an impact on candidates. So if you are in the position where you can make a significant donation, the more you can donate, the more likely it is that you will get some sort of response from, if not the candidate, then a serious person or a senior person in the campaign. but it's not the only way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Debbie is giving us a reminder that you also get a 75% tax credit on donations to political parties. So that's an important piece to keep in mind. Okay, let's move on to our next little point, and that is the debate. Local candidates debates are going to be happening all over the country over the next few weeks, very fast and furious. So Camille, this is a piece that we both really like, and that's asking a question about animal issues at a local candidates debate. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And maybe I'll just kick us off with a little anecdote. So I've actually run for parliament myself a couple times, including in 2014 in the by-election in Toronto. And while this was going on, Kimberly and I were involved in the early days of bringing undercover investigations to Canada. And there was an investigation released mid-campaign. So I was doing a debate at a church in Trinity Spadina, and Kimberly showed up and asked a question about, oh my God, these animal cruelty videos keep coming out. It's really appalling to peel back the curtain and learn what happens behind the closed doors of factory farms. What is each party going to do about it? And that forced all of the candidates in that room that night to respond to the question and to give this some consideration and to appreciate that there's someone in their riding who took the time out of their night to come to this debate because they wanted to ask this question so badly. And that really is the power of these questions, is they can be very agenda setting. They can raise an issue that maybe a candidate has not really thought much about before. They can force them to consider that a little bit further and perhaps go back to their party for guidance and say, hey, how are we supposed to respond when we get questions about animal protection issues? And that in turn can also put that on the issue of the central parties and their databases of talking points and answers and issues that they will share information with to candidates so that they can address appropriate constituent concerns. So there's a whole lot of great, reasons for doing that. Another one, of course, is just educating your fellow voters. There's an audience, there's attention being paid to those debates. And for people to know that others in their community care about this issue is influential to them as well when they make up their mind about whether it's something that they should support.
Mm-hmm. Franz, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, specifically in this election right now, we are all so fun. Most people are so focused on Trump, etc. I suspect that bringing up animal justice issues, even more broadly environmental issues, is likely not going to have an impact on the candidate because they're just kind of narrow focused. However, and this gets back to my earlier points and Camille's points throughout, that this is about relationship building. You find out who in the room is like-minded. You find out how candidates respond to this stuff. It's good information gathering. It may not help in this election, but it will definitely help you find out who's interested in these issues in the audience. Chances are people will come up to you afterwards and say, hey, I'm really glad you raised that question. And that becomes an opportunity for you to then engage them and say, well, here's more information about animal justice, whatever, or in my case, environmental issues. So don't expect that asking a question over the next 3 weeks is going to change a candidate's response or get the central party to focus on this. But do see this as an opportunity of building those long-term relationships, which is what we need to do in order to bring about systemic change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And in the past, I think the last federal election campaign, we had animal justice supporters ask questions and record the answers too, so that they could post on social media, be able to showcase candidates that do have really solid animal sort of support. And that was really, really helpful as well. I think that also engaged a much bigger audience into this as well. So if you are going to ask a question, make sure that you have somebody recording it. And I think still some debates are happening online. So it's good to be able to, it's easy to record that as well. Okay, amazing. Now, I just want to say, folks, you may be kind of going, okay, well, what do I ask? And so we are going to have a resource for you. We're just madly putting it together. But when I send out the replay, we are going to have a little election toolkit for you. And we're going to give some suggestions on questions you could ask. But Camille, in the meantime, what are a few of the things that you think they could touch on?
Sure. So I'll say one really top priority for us right now, as everyone here I'm sure is very well versed with, is we've been campaigning so hard to pass the bill to ban the live export of horses. And unfortunately, that just didn't get across the finish line before the election was called. So that bill is now kaput, and it will have to be reintroduced and redebated and go through the legislative process again before it can potentially pass. So at this point, what we're really hoping for is to see parties recommit to doing that work. In the last election, the Liberals did commit to banning live horse export, and they didn't quite get it done. There was some support, but frankly, they didn't push it as much as we wish that they had. And the new prime minister has yet to recommit to that goal. So it would be really, really fantastic for you to emphasize that point to candidates if they're at your doorstep, if you're engaging in a debate, if you're calling a campaign to ask questions. That for us right now is a really, really top priority. And I will say that it has been an electoral priority before for people, and that has paid off. So let me just give you one example. Winnipeg Centre is currently represented by a Liberal MP called Ben Carr. Ben won his seat in a by-election a couple of years ago. And during that by-election, he reported that the top constituent issue that he heard on the doorsteps from voters was the live horse export. And after he won, he became a really strong champion for that issue. He was on the Agriculture Committee when it studied that bill. He spoke out regularly in favor of it. And so you can see the impact that making sure MPs and candidates know about your stance, you can see the impact that that has down the line. So live horse export, definitely one of our top issues. On top of that, another bill that had a similar tragic sort of end was Bill S-15, which would have outlawed the keeping of great apes and elephants in most circumstances in captivity. And we were trying to get big cats included in that bill as well, but unfortunately the bill also ran out of time, so that didn't pass. That was also a Liberal Party promise. There was some potential that they would recommit to doing that work. They were very supportive of it, and it was a government bill. So we're hoping to see them recommit to that as well. I would say those are the two top priorities. You'll see on our list, there's other ones that are perhaps more general that relate to, wow, why doesn't Canada have a federal Animal Protection Act? Or why are there no laws regulating the treatment of animals on farms? Or what are you going to do to support the plant-based protein sector? There's a few that are a bit more general and less tied to specific legislative initiatives that we want to see. So you can take a look at that list and consider what you want to ask.
Amazing. Thank you. And this sort of leads into the next, thing that we want to talk about, and that is Franz. Most people kind of run and hide when a candidate comes to the door knocking during an election. But this is something we actually think you should embrace. So tell us tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so again, some people, I'm not a big fan of people knocking on my door because it's almost always they're interrupting something, right? However, for those of you on this call and who are watching this afterwards, you're here because you care about animal justice issues. And just to reinforce Camille's point, this is the perfect time to say something. And what you can do ahead of time is copy down on a piece of paper one or two or three talking points. And I suspect that that'll probably be part of your toolkit. Maybe it's on a bill, a specific bill that you want to see come back. Maybe it's a more general thing, and just have that ready. And then when the candidate comes, you're not flustered because it's like, okay, no, I've got the piece of paper right here, and you can read from it. It doesn't really matter. They don't care, right? They don't care whether or not this is coming off the top of your head or if it's from a piece of paper. What matters is that they hear these words, that they hear these ideas, and do that. And as Camille rightly pointed out from her example, if candidates hear something often enough, it's going to stick in them, and they're going to go, "Wow, something's going on there." And that's how you build support for your issues. So don't be afraid to talk to candidates. Have those talking points at hand if that's what matters to you. and also have some fun. Keep in mind, and I think this is really important to say to people, candidates actually are human beings. They're like us, right? And they want to have a good connection at the door. And if you bring passion and empathy and consideration, if that's how you frame things, they're going to listen. If you go there and jab your finger at them and say, "You're blah, blah, blah," they're going to ignore you, right? So think about when you're talking to your candidate about this issue and about what you want them to do. Think about them as if, put yourself in your shoes and imagine somebody was asking you to do something that really wasn't on the top of your to-do list, right? And frame it nicely and be passionate, but be nice about it. That will have a positive impact. Being negative, preachy won't.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you, Franz. And again, it's always about appealing to their greater self. It's not as soon as you point fingers at somebody and make them feel like they're a piece of shit, they're gonna act like that, right? Whereas if you aspire to them, you seem like a compassionate person. So I think you would be interested in this. It's just a much better way to keep an open mind. And I Kate said, Ben Carr's office called me yesterday and I was ready. So that's great, Kate. Thank you. All right. I think we need to get into this piece. Now, voting smart. Okay. Hopefully everybody here that's in Canada is going to vote. And so Camille, let's just sort of start talking about how do people find out where candidates and parties really stand on animal protection? And I know it's been real quick, so it's kind of all over the place. So lead us through where we're at with that.
Yeah, sure. So trying to gather all the information you need to make an informed and good choice in your writing about who's going to be best for advancing your goals around animals and other issues you care about. We will have that material up on our website really soon, as Kimberly said, and there's a few ways that can help. So first of all, we've distributed a survey to the political parties asking for them to share information about their positions on specific animal protection issues. And that's primarily our key priorities. So as I mentioned, horses, great apes and elephant captivity, a handful of other issues too. So that information will be there available for you at some point, hopefully, assuming the parties respond, which some of them do, some of them don't. Another thing you can do is consider a party's past voting records. So we will have some information on that site as well, where you can see about, over the last 6 or so years, there have been a number of animal protection bills that have passed and have been proposed. And you'll be able to see which parties supported those bills, which parties proposed bills that were bad, and how all those votes shook out. So that's also really, really helpful information. But I've got to say, that's not the full picture. You also have to look at your individual riding and figure out information about who's running in that riding, because you could have someone who's maybe from a pretty good political party where they will vote the right way, but maybe they've really not actually been personally that strong in animal protection issues. That might influence how you want to vote as well. So how can you find that out? Well, we talked about making sure you ask questions when they knock on your doors. You can just call campaigns and ask questions about their positions on things. They have people who pick up the phones and they're motivated to try to get an answer for you. You can show up to a meet the candidate type coffee event. You can show up to a debate. You can email the campaign office as well to ask questions. They are relatively accessible during elections. So hopefully you'll be able to get a response that way. So I would say those are the main sources of information I would draw on. Maybe I'm missing some, but that's a good place to start.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I think is important to recognize, and hopefully we've hit this home enough, but that this isn't just about when you're checking in with candidates and their platforms and how they voted in it. This isn't all about info gathering. This is also about advocacy. So every phone call that says, hey, how do you feel about this? These issues, animal issues are going to be recorded somehow. They're going to be noted. So, Franz, let's talk a little bit more about the actual voting. Okay. Now we know that for the most part, unfortunately, more progressive political parties have tended to be better on animal issues. And so there is this thing, thing called strategic voting that for some is a dirty word, for some is like a godsend. Can you talk a little bit about the role of strategic voting and this election?
Right. So strategic voting is kind of like a band-aid solution. The big problem, of course, is that our electoral system is, if not broken, it's not in good shape. The so-called first past the post system that we have is not representative, because more often than not, the party that wins and forms government gets significantly less than the majority of the votes. And if we replace that with what's called proportional representation, where parties get the number of seats they have in the parliament is based on their proportion of the vote. So if they receive 40% of the popular vote, they get 40% of the seats. So that's the solution, right? And I would urge everybody on this who's watching this and is participating today, make sure you're also advocating for that, because getting the right electoral system in place is going to solve a whole bunch of problems above and beyond animal justice issues. But to get to strategic voting is very difficult to implement because there's a lot going on. As Camille rightly pointed out, you may have a candidate who's really strong, or I think you said the obverse, but you may have a candidate who's really strong on animal justice issues, but their party isn't. So do you vote for them? I don't know. Or it's the other way around, where the party's strong but the candidate isn't. And then it's a question of, well, okay, in the larger scheme of things, most people don't just vote on one issue. It's a combination of things. The party may be good on this, but bad on other things that matter to you. How do you make that decision? I don't know. And then it's like, well, maybe I should be voting to stop a bad candidate from winning, so that, it's not a question of getting the right candidate in. It's ensuring the wrong candidate doesn't win. These are very complicated. I know that there are a lot of resources out there, especially that have been created in the last couple of years about strategic voting, even websites. I don't know how many of them I don't know if any of them consider animal justice issues. They may consider a wide range of other issues. But the bottom line with all of this, and I say this as a political scientist, I'm trained, I have a PhD in political science. Learn about your electoral system. It's not rocket science. It's actually easy to understand once you spend a bit of time understanding it. Once you know that, you will be in a much better position, maybe not this, well, for sure not this election, but in the next election, to be able to figure out where is my vote best have the most powerful impact for what matters to me. So look into strategic voting, and there's websites out there. In fact, I think one may have even been shared in the chat. But more generally, understand how the voting system works so that you can make informed votes. And finally, advocate for true electoral reform.
You're singing my song there, Franz. We actually have an excellent module in our Animal Justice Academy course with Dave Meslin, talking about electoral reform, talking about proportional representation. We have talked a lot about this in Animal Justice Academy. So if you're interested in finding out more, please check that out. And it's also on our Animal Justice Academy YouTube channel. I'll just mention, we have put a website called votewell.ca. And what this website does is you put your postal code in, it brings up your riding, and it basically tells you where the polls are at with the different parties. So for example, it doesn't really make sense strategic, like, okay, so say you're wanting to not have the conservatives in your riding because you don't like, what they're saying. But you also don't really want to vote liberal. You want to vote, say, Green Party. What this will do is it'll show you where the polls are, and if the conservative candidate is nowhere to be found, like it's really low, then you might as well just vote your conscience, right? again, you need to decide. You may also say, well, no, we need as many, liberal seats as possible. So it's just going to give you a little bit more information. And honestly, there may not even be any question about whether you need to strategic vote or not. Anyway, we're not advocating that you strategic vote. We're just saying this is one of the levers in a broken system that some people do consider, and that is a resource for you to check out. Again, in our toolkit, we are going to have voting records of each party, and that will really help you as well to decide. Okay, I want to just move on to, actually, I want to read you a couple of comments because there's some neat ideas coming out in the chat about other ways to engage from our supporters here. Debbie said, I stood outside Mark Carney's rally in Winnipeg with another activist with signs asking, when is his party, will his party keep his promise to end the live export of horses for slaughter? So that's amazing. I love that. Showing up to rallies. Poilievre's got these big rallies. Show up with some signs. It's amazing. They'll probably not let you, but if it's an outdoor one, they can't help it, right? Dan said, I like to ask if the candidate has or had a dog, a horse, a cat. It's a great icebreaker. It helps connect. So wonderful thing to ask, as Franz brought up earlier. Okay, so Camille and Franz, let's talk about the election is done. And we've done this work and we've gone out and we've canvassed, or we've, asked a debate question, things like that. If you canvassed or donated, how to engage next? Okay. Do you follow up with a congratulations email? How long should you wait to request, to meet, to make your sort of voice known? What are your recommendations? Franz, let's start with you.
A great question. And I think just 30 seconds context. Too often in Canada, we think of engaging in politics and democracy as just voting. And it's much more than that. It should be happening, all the time between elections. In my experience, for sure, send a congratulatory email, and for sure to the person, your main contact at the campaign office that you were at, right? And maybe even to the candidate themselves, congratulations. If they won or lost, it doesn't really matter. Thanks for being involved. Thanks for helping ensure democracy stays vital and strong, whatever, the appropriate language is given the outcome. I find when I worked in Jack's office at City Hall, and this is municipal level, so it's slightly different, but I think the same logic applies. There's a big difference between someone showing up as an individual and someone showing up perhaps with another person as part of a larger group. And if you, or representing a significant number of constituents. So if you go up to a meeting and say, here are some great ideas that I want you to implement, let's say this is, and I would wait probably a month or two after the election, because especially if it's a new, if the person just got newly elected, it's like, starting a new job. You don't want to go bug them on day 5. They're still figuring out where the washroom is and where the kitchen is, right? So you wait a few weeks, right? But not too long. But you go to, it's best to go to the meeting with ideas or proposal that has a lot as community buy-in. Maybe it's a hey, we want you to support this bill, and here are signatures from 100 people who just from your voters that says we want you to support it, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, here, I individual want you to do X, but it's much more powerful if you show up at a meeting saying, listen, here's a document that's been signed by 50 or 100 people, specifically their voters. This is why we want you to do that. That's going to have an impact on them, because they're, as soon as candidates have finished and have been elected, they're already beginning to think about the next election. And they're already beginning to think about, okay, what can I do to make sure that voters are happy with me? So you want to show you have power, that you have community power behind you when you're meeting. That is the best way forward.
Excellent. Camille, anything you want to add to that?
I think that's all really solid, excellent advice. The only couple things I would maybe build on that would be to say, think about showing up to their election night party. Emotions are running high. Everybody's always really happy. It's a great chance to hug the candidate and thank them for their great work, and they're going to remember that you were there celebrating with them. Think about maybe doing a social media post congratulating them as well. A lot of them manage their accounts sometimes themselves, and we'll see that looking through Twitter or Instagram. And yeah, I mean, I think that Francis' point about really making sure that you're showing strength in numbers in your local riding, which is the domain that you have somewhat of an influence over, is really key. In this election, we're really hoping to see some platform commitments from parties. It's a little early for platforms to come out. The tendency these days is to put them out pretty close to the end of the election campaign, so there's not weeks and weeks of attacks over platform commitments. So I'm hoping that we'll see some commitments from different parties, and that's a really good sort of entry point for you to have a first meeting with them about, is to say, look, you agreed that it was important to hopefully ban the live export of horses. All these people in your riding agree with this. What can we do to support you and help you do that work?
Excellent. So you talking about the platforms, Camille, also just sort of reminds me of because this election is such a whirlwind election, and sort of nobody knew exactly when it was going to happen. There just are a lot of missing pieces right now. So, for example, if you're wondering, how do I find out about my all candidates debates? They may not have been scheduled yet. The best thing is to choose, one of the candidates in your riding and just keep posted on their social media or their website. They'll have it on. Also, as far as some ridings don't even have all their candidates yet. So that's another thing. There is Elections Canada. Ina can drop that link in the chat. But this Elections Canada link will lead you to your riding, and will give you who the candidates are that have been confirmed. So if you're like, I don't even know which candidates who to reach out to, that's a way to do it. So again, we're a little haphazard this election. Usually I think, we like to be more organized, but the political parties like to be more organized, but that's life right now. Okay. Last thing I just want to ask the folks that are here. We've now given you all sorts of ideas, not just us, but our folks here in the community. So I'd love for people to put into the chat, what are you committing to doing in this election? What are you committing to doing? Are you going to door knock? Are you going to canvass? Are you going to call candidates and ask where they stand on these animal issues? Are you going to hold a sign at a rally? Are you going to, I'm trying to think what else we said. Are you going to ask a question at a candidates debate? Put them in the chat. Let's get some energy going. Let's get, often it's really, really wonderful to commit it to a larger group. Okay, I'm going to the rally. Let me see here. What else do we have? There's always a little bit of a delay. Okay, Jade's gonna call the candidates. Jenny McQueen's gonna do a bit of everything. By the way, Jenny had said she's done door knocking in the past, and it has been really great exercise. Ina said definitely calling. Nancy's gonna be prepared at the door. Jane said going to find out where the candidates in her riding stand on animal protection candidates. Ask questions at the debate, Elise said. Engage with candidates at the debates. Canvassing for my conservative candidate. Amazing, Shane. All the power to you. K has already spoke to the offices of the candidates already. This is amazing, folks. I love this energy. And I really want to thank our guests today, Franz and Camille, for guiding us so expertly through all of the options. Sometimes we feel pretty powerless in politics. And so it's just really good to be reminded that we actually count, and there are actually things we can do. So Ina, do you mind taking us back to gallery view so we can see everybody? And I just, before our final thank you, I just want to say just a quick little announcement that our next event will be an Animal Justice Academy event, Ways to Advocate for Vegan Fashion with Vicki Lanola. That's going to be coming up on April 17th. And I believe that Ina will put the link in for registration into the chat. And for our speakers, make sure that you're on gallery view. And folks, can we please give a great, big, beautiful thank you to Franz and Camille for being here, and thank you for your wisdom. Thank you so much to everybody for being here today, and let's get out there and let's make our voices heard for animals. Okay, they are not able to, you know, phone up the candidates themselves. They're counting on us to take action, folks. All right, Franz, Camille, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, everybody, good
Thank you so
luck.
much.
Keep us posted, and look out for our toolkit that we'll be sending with the replay. Bye.